Hi, welcome to our SIGUX webinar. My name is Beth Rugg, and I'm from Ithaca College in New York. I'm the Professional Development Coordinator for SIGUX, and will be helping to facilitate this event. Lori Fox from Suno Geneseo is our subject matter expert, and we'll be talking about the X factor, how to make a presentation that wows. But before we start, I want to just double check on a few things. By default, all attendees are muted. So there's going to be two ways that you can participate in the conversation and ask questions, by either using the chat feature or by raising your hand. So I want to see if we can all get the knack of raising your hand. Oh, and if you raise your hand, then I'll know that you actually want to be unmuted, and I'll go ahead and unmute you. But our first question is, and if you can go ahead and raise your hands for this, how many of you are presenting at the SIGUX conference this year? Great. I can see that Chris and John are. Now go ahead. You should be able to take your hand down. Great. Thank you. And then just to see, so the rest of you can use the hand feature, how many of you are just interested in getting some presentation tips and tricks? Wonderful. Thank you. Go ahead and take down your hands, Glenda and Patricia. So hopefully you have a good sense for how the hand-raising feature works. Now, as far as asking a question, if you don't want to speak, you can certainly use the question pod and send me a question. Either I can answer it privately if it's something that, if it's just regarding the actual webinar, or if it's based on the content, then I'll give Lori a heads up that there's a question that I'll ask on your behalf and that she can answer. So with that, I'm just going to turn the screen over to Lori, and we'll get this webinar underway. Let me go ahead and change. There you go, Lori, making you the presenter.
Okay, can you see my presentation? Yeah, well, here we go. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Like Beth said, my name is Lori Fox. I am going to talk to you a bit about creating your presentation for SIGUX.
Lori, can I just interrupt you for a second?
Sure.
I'm sorry. Just so you know, we can see both slides. We see your current slide and your next slide.
All right, so hold on. Let me change my window so that it only shows one. Okay, now you should just see one, right?
That is correct.
Okay, here we go. So the first thing that I want to talk to you about is the audience. We're going to talk a little bit about what a SIGUX audience is like. Because you want to be sure to involve the audience, which you can do like Beth did at the beginning of the webinar with a show of hand. You can offer questions throughout or ask questions, but it's also important that you adjust to the crowd that's at your session. One thing to think about is, when is your presentation? Is it first thing in the morning when people are kind of sleepy? Is it just after lunch when people might be in a little bit of a food coma, kind of falling asleep, so you want to perk them up? I also want to suggest that you make eye contact with people in the audience. I usually pick 2 or 3 people towards the front and a couple people scattered throughout the back. And those are people that I make eye contact with throughout the presentation, so that you're not always focusing on one area of the room or looking directly in the back. The rooms at SIGUX are different every year. Sometimes they're short and wide. Sometimes they're quite long. You might find that people are scattered throughout the room. So you want to kind of, when you first get in there to look at the presentation, take a look and see, where's the audience sitting? Who are you going to focus on? Who are you talking to? I also want to be sure that you know, don't panic if people leave your presentation. Sometimes I get caught where there are 2 presentations that look great at the same time, so I might try to hit a little bit of both, or sometimes I might be in the wrong room. So you will see that some people do get up and leave, and there will also be late people that come in, but in general, people are very polite to the speakers. Content, useful content is of course the core of your presentation. You want to be sure that you are well organized, and one way to do that is to start with an introduction. This is an opportunity to tell a little bit about yourself, your university, gives you an opportunity to promote your university. Remember that you're a representative of the college that you work for. And you can also talk about the size of staff. It makes a difference when you're at a presentation. I come from, for example, a mid-sized college where we have about 5,200 undergraduate students. It's very different from a small private university with 500 students, and of course very different from a university system that might have 40,000 undergraduates. This is also where you want to think about, how am I going to add a logo to my presentation? Perhaps it's something that the university requires you to do. You might want to do it in school colors, and you might want to use a footer on every page. Now you notice that I did not fully introduce myself to you, so here is an introduction slide that's about me. And you see here that I've included some logos of some brands that I represent. Of course, I'm a member of ACM and a member of SIGEX. There's my university logo, the Geneseo logo. But in this case, the presentation really is about me, who I am and what I'm doing. So you want to, here again, connect with your audience, tell a little bit about yourself, talk about perhaps how long you've been in higher education, what your job is, and include some current information about yourself so people remember you. One year when I was at SIGEX, I was a session chair for a gentleman who wore a kilt. He was the presenter in the kilt. That's something that made me recognize him at all future sessions and other conferences. So you want to, this is a good opportunity for you to meet with people and for them to know more about what you're doing. So if you think about the topic of your paper, if you're presenting for SIGEX 2012, of course you have written an abstract, which is a paragraph that summarizes what your presentation is. You've worked pretty hard on a paper that's 4 or 5 pages long, and you have an opportunity in your topic to share some extras. Now, one of the things that we try to work on in SIGEX is that the topic of your presentation needs to be pretty closely aligned with what's in your abstract. You want to be sure that what people see in the program, which is the abstract, is what they'll also see at your presentation. Now, between your paper and the extra things that you can give to your presentation, you have a bit more flexibility. And again, this depends on the type of paper you're presenting. If you're presenting something that's very technical, for example, your paper might have a lot of details and diagrams that might not be that interesting in your presentation at the conference. But it's a good place for you to send people to refer. Also, the extras are the fun things, the videos. We've seen some skits, some play acting, and an opportunity to share things that aren't easy to display in your paper. So you do have more flexibility in your presentation, but you want to be sure that you cover everything from your abstract. Next is style. And this, I'm referring to the style of your slides. You see here that the presentation I'm doing today is very plain, very unbranded, kind of simplistic. And I tried to stick to having a headline with just 2 or 3 key ideas, nothing too flashy, and I'm mostly talking about each aspect of your presentation as we're going through it. When you select style, be sure that you select something that's readable on the screen. You want to have a font that is big enough to read. I'll show you an example of a not so great slide coming up soon. But you also want to be sure that you select colors that go well together. I have a son in high school, for example, who is colorblind. And I didn't really think about when you do web design or presentation to be sure to pick colors that are easily distinguished from one another. Also, you want to be sure to include in your presentation and the style an opportunity to reinforce what's on your screen with stories, statistics, and examples. Oh, that was bad. But I had to throw a little bit of style in that page. Quantity and quality of slides is another important thing to consider. A pretty common rule of thumb for any sort of presentation is that you'll have 1 slide per minute. And that mark changes quite frequently. I actually read an article last week that talks about doing 3 slides per minute. That's a lot of slides with very little content. In a technical presentation such as SIGUX, you want to be sure that you're talking at least 1 minute per slide. In some slides you may even find that you talk longer. This is where practice comes into play as well. You should run through your presentation a time or two before you come to SIGUX. I usually have my staff be my guinea pigs and listen to my presentation to know how long each slide takes. Because you want to be sure that you have the right amount of slides for the time that you have available. Let's talk about data. Here I have what is obviously a pretty fake graph. But you can see that data is vital to your presentation. It's kind of the meat, what people are coming to see. What types of surveys have you done? What type of participation do you have in your project? And you can see that this graph has some bad things going on for it. First of all, I noticed that the labels are not really relevant. Region 1, Region 2, or things that are local vernacular to my college but might not mean things to other people are something that you want to avoid at your SIGUX presentation. You always want to be sure that you pick good colors, and here's where color comes into play a little bit. The left and rightmost bars in each region are very difficult to distinguish. So the legend up above, it's hard to tell which bar is 2007 and which bar is really 2010. You also want to be sure that you choose the right kind of graph to display. Perhaps a pie chart versus a bar chart. And you want to be sure that the graph is large enough for people to read, especially in those long and narrow rooms that you might present in. Media. I like presentations that have something added, perhaps a little video that you can talk about for a few minutes or a demonstration. But it's important to remember that things can and sometimes do go wrong with presentations, and especially things like the internet connection in your hotel. So I always try to download my video to my hard drive so I know it plays quickly. And if I plan for a live demo, I also have some screenshots available in case that live demo does not work. For example, when I was at SIGUX in St. Louis, we were showing a demonstration of a new wiki that we had implemented at my college. And not only did we have internet issues, but about 10 minutes before the presentation, my co-presenter's computer hard drive died. That was pretty unfortunate. Luckily, we had extra copies of slides with us, and we were able to do our demo on someone else's computer. But it's always important for media that you bring everything you need with you and test it so that you know it works. entertainment. This is another important part of your presentation that will help your audience relate to you. It will help keep attention, and it will be sure that your presentation is a memorable one. When I'm doing a webinar like this, it's kind of hard for me to tell what my audience is doing and how they are relating to me. So the good thing about SIGUX is that you're making eye contact with your audience and you're able to have a conversation and share some stories. One story that I wanted to share in this presentation is I have a colleague here on campus who I really respect. He's a brilliant man, but he is not very good at preparing for presentations. I co-presented with him one time. We had 75 minutes to present. He created 40 slides. He did not need to practice. He was an expert. He ran through his slides in 12 minutes. That left me in a little bit of a lurch. So you want to be sure to prepare, and you want to think about how can you entertain your audience. It might not be juggling, it might not be a kilt, but you will have other opportunities to share a bit of levity with your audience. Practice. Practice, practice, practice. I actually get more nervous for my practice presentations than I do for the real thing. It's important to practice transitions, especially if you are co-presenting with someone else. Run through things with your presentation partner so you know which slides you're doing and how the transitions flow. You also should think about the tempo of your presentation. When you do present for real, people's typical tendency is to speed up. So it's very important that you think about the tempo that you're speaking, adding natural pauses to be sure that you are filling the time appropriately, not ending too early, but also you want to be sure that you fill up your allotted time. One of the things that I like to think about when I'm doing a presentation at SIGUX is what am I doing with that hour? And sometimes I actually write and make a little chart for myself. Let's say, as in today, our presentation starts at 3 o'clock and is scheduled to end at 4 o'clock. I'm not sure, Beth, are we going till 4?
No, we don't need to, Lori.
Okay. So what I try to think about at SIGUX is I have that presentation that starts at 3 and ends at 4. We always want to leave about 15 minutes for questions at the end of your presentation. So that means I'm really going to be only talking for about 45 minutes. But also, at the start of your presentation is an opportunity for an introduction. Your session chair will get up and introduce you, offer some housekeeping tips. So that takes about 4 or 5 minutes. So you might actually not even begin speaking until 3:05 p.m. So then what I do is I take that 40 minutes and I break it up into 3 chunks where I will keep track of what point I am in the presentation at about 3:25 and at about 3:35, just about 10 minutes apart. So I can adjust my pace as I move through my presentation. You also might find that your presentation has some natural breaks where it would be helpful or beneficial to give the audience time to interact with you. Those are kind of rest stops. So think of it as a road trip. You're leaving your house at 3:05. At 3:20, you're going to stop. And then perhaps at 3:35 or 3:40, you're going to stop again. But the practice of the tempo and the timing of your presentation will ensure that you fill up your time, you entertain your audience, and you are able to fit in everything that you hope to talk about. We talked a little bit about preparing for the worst already, and I shared with you a bit about my computer malfunction, but I just want to remind you that it's important to bring perhaps an extra copy of your presentation on a thumb drive. For example, when Beth and I prepare for the webinar today, I always send her a copy of my presentation in case something happens on my computer. She can back up for me. You also have to remember that we are technical people, all cramming onto that hotel wireless internet. So you want to be prepared that something might happen where you might not be able to get on the internet. And I believe that you also do need to carry paper with you in this kind of situation so that you can follow along with your timing roadmap and with extra notes that you're looking for on your slides. So we're going to prepare for the worst, but we're going to emulate the best. And there are a few places that I frequently go to look for awesome presentations. Now, as someone who's been in higher ed for almost 20 years, I've been to a lot of conferences, and I've been to a lot of different style of presentations. And you can choose which style fits with your speaking style. Perhaps you want to do a presentation that's highly visual with very little text. So you have mostly pictures or data graphs that then you fill in with words. You also could have some high impact slides with visuals and evidence. You also could create a presentation that has data, which is like notes on a page that you bring the information to life when you tell a story and speak to people. I also believe that the presentations I enjoy the most are the ones where the presenters are articulate and speak clearly and loudly. And I gotta tell you, it's when you use the microphone. Now, a lot of people don't like how their voice sounds in the microphone, or they think that they can speak loud enough without the microphone. But in a hotel conference situation like this, the microphone is very important to be sure that your voice can be heard in the whole room. Now here's my bad slide. It has too much information. The font is very small, but I wanted to talk with you a little bit about TED Talks. TED Talks are pretty popular here at Geneseo. We tend to share good ones with each other. Sometimes they're funny, sometimes they're serious. You may have watched some of them before. But TED Talks are very interesting because they have a very strict policy for how you give a TED Talk. The time is short. It's less than 18 minutes, and many are only 3 to 6 minutes. But everyone that presents a TED Talk is given these commandments. And I think that these are very important to remember. And a few things that I just want to point out, because I don't want to read the slide to you, is thou shalt not flaunt thine ego. Speak of thy failure as well as thy success. It's important when we work together and share things together at SIGUX that we are honest about our failures and share our failures to help someone avoid that type of pain. I also think it's important to remember that laughter is good, and sometimes in a presentation, especially if you have a popular topic, you get a lot of questions. You get kind of close to that 4 o'clock, the end of your hour. You want to be sure to move away from the podium and let the next nervous person come in and set up their presentation. So let's talk a little bit more specifically about presenting at SIGUX. There are a couple things that the conference provides for you to make sure that you're ready to give the best presentation possible. The first one is what we call a session chair. Every presenter will have a session chair that introduces them and handles all of the housekeeping things in the room. The session chair is also available to help you with your timing. They can give you a warning when there is, as time is ticking by. Typically they have sheets that show 15 minutes left, 5 minutes left, 2 minutes left, 0 minutes left. But they are really there to make sure things go well in the room. You also will be invited to a speaker breakfast. And I know the speaker breakfast is early, but it's important to go to the speaker breakfast to meet your session chair and discuss a little bit about yourself and your presentation. That will give the session chair good information to be able to help you during your presentation. There is also a speaker ready room that is available whenever the registration desk is open. And you can go into that room with your computer and test the setup of your computer. Also, I try to show up to my room early, and many times I will sneak into my room at an open time, either early or right after lunch, just to kind of get the layout of my room, to think about where are my points of contact for eye contact, and where is the podium set up compared to the presentation screen. Will I be tripping over things if I walk around? Am I able to have some movement? Be sure to bring any adapters that you need. My Macintosh, for example, needs an adapter. SIGUX, sometimes we have a few spares at the desk, or you might be able to beg and borrow one, but we will not have them on hand. So be sure that your computer is ready to present. And again, please use the microphone. Now I have listed here some references of some places that I think are good to go look at good presentations. The first one is Death by PowerPoint. One of my colleagues recommended that one to me. He likes to go there to look at examples of what good PowerPoint presentations look like. Edward Tufte, that's the second link. He is someone that does fantastic data-driven presentations, really gorgeous slides with data and different graphs. TED.com will have your TED Talks. The link for the 10 Commandments was kind of hard to find. I would recommend that you just Google that if you want to look at them more closely. And the last one, which I believe you pronounce PechaKucha, they are another organization that really tries to help people learn how to give good presentations. So if you want to take a screen capture of this page to take a look at a few of those, we will move on to questions. And there's my contact information. If you have any specific questions or would like a copy of my slides, although they don't say too much, they might give you some reminders. So Beth, do you want to see if anyone has any questions?
Sure. Do we have any questions out there in the mix? You can either put them into the question pod or raise your hand. I'm not seeing any questions come in. Oh, okay. Yes, we have one. All right. So, Lori, this is a comment from Chris. Lori, okay. This information was fantastic. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you.
Chris, thank you. Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Chris. And for those of you who are able to go to the SIGUX conference, of course, Lori and I would very much enjoy meeting you if we do not know you already.
Yeah, and I have a bonus slide at the end. And you guys are the first ones to hear the official announcement of our new mobile device conference companion. We've partnered this year with a company called EventBoard. They have apps that are available for iPhone, Android, and Windows Phone. It's populated with information about all of our speakers, the entire schedule, maps for the conference. It's something that I'm very proud of that we put together for this year and hope to use in future years. So if you have an iPhone or Android, it works on iPad too, or a Windows Phone. You can either scan that or just search in your app store for Event Board, which is made by a company called Falafel. And it really is a fantastic way to have all the information you need about the conference right on your smartphone. So there's the bonus for today.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Lori. You always do a wonderful job. I've had the opportunity of sitting in on many of Lori's presentations, and because we share a similar job position, and she's always a presenter I look forward to hearing more from. So if any of you have not yet registered for the SIGUX conference, please do. Even though early registration deadline is passed, you could still certainly sign up. If any of you are not SIGUX members, it is honestly one of the best values out there. $25 is the annual membership fee, great listserv, and lots of opportunities that come your way with that $25. So, and in the end, if you have any questions, feel free to email me, erugg@ithaca.edu. I believe I am recording this webinar, so it should be available on the SIGUX website within the next couple of days. So thank you all for your time. And with that, this webinar is over.